Good day, I'm Wayne Duvinage from OUTA. This is our weekly wrap on the 21st of November. Lots to talk about. But I think firstly, let me start with, if you're a resident of Johannesburg, you might have noticed how different many areas are looking. Fresh tar on the roads, the pavements are swept, traffic lights are behaving for once. And we know this is all timed perfectly for the G20. So it's good to see what the city can look like when delivery becomes urgent. But let's be honest, these improvements are focused on the routes that matter to visitors and not on the communities that live here. And we need to see, because we deserve this level of service every day, not just when the world is watching. But let me get into the heat of the the meat, of what this week's wrap is about. And the big ticket item, obviously, is the G20. It's here now. And let me just set the scene about the G20 and why it's important to us, because it is a major international forum. And it does bring together the leading economies of the world, 19 of them, plus the European Union, which makes up the 20. This is about discussing global economic and financial development challenges. And a lot of stuff is conducted through working groups that tackle the international diplomacy and policy matters, through to the economic and financial issues that really are serious today in our economies of the world. And these inputs, we know, flow into the Leaders Summit, which will take place in the next few days. And at OUTA, we believe that it is a relevant event because it's economic and governance and development decisions that flow out of this conference will have an impact, and does have an impact, on the global financial architecture and matters of transparency and national debt and tax fairness and other issues which do influence South Africa and certainly the African region. And so it's good to see that the official theme for South Africa's presidency is solidarity, equality, and sustainability. These things mean a lot to us. And as the host country, we've prioritized Africa's development agenda at this G20. Specifically, debt sustainability for Africa, inclusive industrialization, decent work, and justice in the global value chains. And while there've been various focus summits unfolding in the few days and weeks leading up to the main summit, we're expecting to hear declarations around these major thematic pillars, relating to growth and inequality, debt and financing, as I was saying, the development architecture, the trade and the digital economy, climate and transition. These are all so important to us and the African continent. But in particular for South Africa, and more broadly, we hope to see that there is an intensive push to elevate Africa's voice on the global stage when it comes to debt relief, when it comes to development finance, industrialization. Because we've no doubt, though, that the geopolitical tensions will be ventilated around matters of participation and whose voice counts. And will this influence the extent of consensus? Because we have some big players missing. We've already heard that the US has reportedly signaled that any declarations without its participation are not valid to them. And, this is a concern. Why does America expect the majority of the world leaders to put on hold decisions for another year that can and should be taken at these conferences? So a lot of tension around that. But the world goes on, and the G20 goes on. And what we must know is that we have a lot of friends. Europe is here supporting us. Many parts of the globe are supporting us in various things. And of course, there are a lot of questions about South Africa's conduct. Certainly, stuff that worries us, which we hope is ventilated quite extensively, and that is our lack of transparency, our lack of focus on corruption and the criminal syndicates that impact on our taxation in this country. Why? Because global tax is an issue. Well, South Africa's tax is an issue for us. And we need to see commitments not only to inclusive governance and supply chain transitions and the digital economy at a global level and through the whole G20 discussions, but here in South Africa, we'd love the international community to put the spotlight on our ethical or unethical conduct, rather, when it comes to our business and our affairs. And let's not beat around the bush. We have serious corruption problems. We have serious maladministration and political interference problems. And we need to clean up our house before we start asking the world to do what it should be doing for us. And I think that's going to be a very strong theme that comes out of this. So let me just say that I was fortunate to be part of a discussion panel at the G20 Social Summit on Tuesday. And it was very interesting because we were discussing business and the impact of higher education across the globe, and how the various collaboration between business, government, and civil society, because this was a civil society, a social compact discussion as well. And the issues that I'd highlighted there was that it is sad, and there were people in positions of authority in government in that hall when we were discussing this in our panel discussion, around how sad it is that when civil society raises the flag on corruption and gross maladministration and the abuse of power by people in positions of power, it is ignored by government. And we've seen this brazen ignorance, this deliberate ignorance to the corruption and the abuse of power, particularly in higher education, which was the theme of that discussion. And we've done a lot of work on the CETAs and the NSFAS. And our concerns are that millions of rands are flowing to corrupt syndicates and political agendas. And so we made this very known in that discussion at the G20 Global Summit. Hopefully, people in government are listening, because our concern is this, that business fears government and civil society doesn't fear government. And very often civil society is the conduit to good governance and to tackling the many issues that aren't being tackled, that people in positions of power are looking away from and not getting down to the brass tacks of holding people to account. So we hope that our message came through loud and clear. But moving on now, because G20 we're going to report on next week again after it's the main summit is finished. And there's going to be a lot to talk about there. Let's just move on to the other interesting things that have been happening the last few days. Obviously, the Madlanga Commission and the Parliamentary Ad Hoc Committee take center stage here, focusing on this nonsense, this criminal infiltration and the abuse of power in our criminal justice system. At the Ad Hoc Committee, first up was Professor Mary de Haas's testimony, which landed with some serious allegations of torture and tubing and fabricated evidence and political interference inside the political killings task team. But when MPs asked her for the basics, like dates, names, documentation, she couldn't give them. And her frustration was clearly visible, but so was the committee's. This paints a picture of policing and that environment that is so divided, that is so politicized, that even long-term observers cannot pin down the clear versions of events. And then obviously came Cedric and Nkabinde, 2 days, 2 long days of 2 affidavits that just don't line up, WhatsApp messages that contradict each other, secret recordings of the police commissioner and the strange appearance of masked officers at his home. And his versions shifted too many times for the MPs to trust it. And that matters, because this is supposed to be a forum that brings clarity and not more confusion. And then came that much report about Medicare 24 tender, and Lieutenant General Molefe finally did confirm that the SAPS awarded this 360 million rand medical services tender to a supplier that wasn't the highest scoring, nor were they fully compliant or properly verified and vetted. And what surfaced was that Vusi Matlala contracted and was actually in contact before he was contracted to do so with the political and the procurement officials directly during the process. So this is very pressing. I mean, this has to ask why. How does this happen? And so the the inquiry went into the space of trying to ensure that they got the accurate information around how and why he influenced the outcome of that tender. And instead, sadly, of blocking him or escalating the contact to officials who just kept talking to him, what we're told was that, warning signs were raised inside the division and nothing happened. It went nowhere. And by the time that tender was awarded and the red flags were already waving wildly with missing documents and irregular pricing, the questionable compliance was not dealt with. These are the very weaknesses that allowed irregular suppliers into the Tembisa hospital tenders, which Babita Deokaran was assassinated for when she raised the flag at payment time. And it just, we just have to realize that had all this nonsense been detected through the robust and good governance processes that we expect in the police force, Babita would probably still be alive today. Think about that. Our poor police leadership and their lack of governance and systems and meaningful oversight killed Babita Deokaran. And there are many others that have suffered a similar fate because of this very issue. And so over at the Madlanga Commission, because that was happening at the ad hoc inquiry, but over at the Madlanga Commission, the week was largely spent unpacking the dramatic claims made by Brown Mogotsi, an influencer. And one by one, those claims started to fall apart. He couldn't prove his intelligence background. He admitted to lying under oath to obtain a warrant. He misunderstood or misrepresented a constitutional court ruling. His WhatsApp and Signal messages didn't match his version of the events. The timelines were wrong. The screenshots were missing. And by Thursday, the Commission made it very clear that Mogotsi's credibility was now a central issue. And again, we return to the same problem. It just becomes nearly impossible to fix this policing issue when evidence is tangled in contradictions, guesswork, and personal agendas. Crime intelligence reinstatements. That's an interesting development that took place this weekend. While all this was happening in the commissions, SAPS reinstated Lieutenant General Dumisani Khumalo as head of crime intelligence, despite ongoing criminal charges. And he's not the only one returning. 4 other senior criminal intelligence or crime intelligence officers who face charges have also been placed back in their positions. And it does raise serious questions around this leadership stability and the messages that we send when it comes to accountability. And we just need to know what is actually going on here. Can anybody really tell us? Over at the Nkabinde inquiry, another inquiry where the Gauteng Director of Public Prosecutions, Andrew Chauke's fitness to hold office was being dissected. It's just sad to see how his prosecutorial decisions were influenced by politics. And I think we're going to see a lot more of that unfolding, and how there's been an inconsistency that has been applied in his decision making, and whether the trust inside the NPA has collapsed as a result of his conduct. Chauke disputes these allegations, obviously, but the inquiry is now testing something bigger, and it's testing whether the NPA has the independence and the internal safeguards needed to rebuild credibility. And I must say, we were very surprised, maybe not actually, when Chauke dropped the charges against ANC MP Zizi Kodwa on account of his clear evidence that we could see, and the media had reported on, that he was publicly involved in dubious dealings and contracts being awarded and tenders and gratuities being earned. So, yeah, very, very concerning that, and we'll have to look forward to see what happens there. So I just think, in conclusion, it's been another week of commission of inquiries and committees that are digging deep into years of institutional damage in South Africa. And while the stories differ, the thread remains the same. Weak controls, conflicted leadership, testimony that doesn't line up, systems that are meant to protect the public are now battlegrounds for factions and insiders. And this is exactly why OUTA shows up. This is our job. We keep the pressure on and demand transparency and insist that public institutions work for the people whom they're meant to serve. So with South Africa on the global stage and the spotlight on G20, there's no better time to show what real accountability should look like. And let me just not forget, by the way, yes, Malusi Gigaba, remember a couple of days or weeks ago, he was summoned to IDAC just for some questioning. He crowed about the fact that there was nothing untoward, he wasn't being arrested. Well, that was then, this is now. He's now in court, he's being charged for his role in the transactions that took place at Transnet in the Zuma state capture eras. So we'll have to watch that space. We see now he stepped aside, but this is good to see that this is happening, and this is good news. And yes, we know that it's late in the day, and a lot of people will say, yeah, but nothing's going to really happen to him. But we beg to differ. The rule of law, we can see and feel, is starting to flow. It's never a dull day in South Africa. And let me finish by saying this. Good things are actually happening in South Africa today. The rand is strengthening. We're off the FATF grey listing. These commissions of inquiry are taking shape. Good information that should flow into the rule of law is going to take place. The G20 Summit is here, and so much more. It doesn't mean, I'm not trying to gloss over the fact that we don't have our issues. We have serious problems. It's not all hunky-dory, not by a long way. Our corruption and criminal conduct remains rampant. So do many other issues around education, inequality, health, social welfare. We've got a lot to do. But there are some upticks, and we must cherish those, and we must seize those trajectories and make sure that it's up to every one of us to drive them higher, to make sure that we work harder to unlock the potential in our country. So until next week, folks, stay safe, have a good weekend, and if I can just ask you to please click on subscribe and share this message, this video, with friends and family that you know that are interested in the work that OUTA does. Until next time, stay well.